It actually comes down to a very simple equation. Real estate will act as an inflation hedge even during periods of high inflation, so inflation is on the rise again, reaching levels in the US not seen since the 2008 global financial crisis. Boom boom. And there are rumours that asset bubbles are beginning to form, as seen just 2 weeks ago by the announcements of Ray Dalio, one of the founders of one of the world's largest hedge funds, that there could be asset bubbles forming, particularly around tech stocks. And close to home in the real estate industry, you can see that materials for new builds are skyrocketing, going through the proverbial roof. Why is this happening, and what does it mean for your investment? Will real estate be there to act as an inflation hedge and save your investments, or will it be the cause for your portfolio's demise? That is the question I'm here today to answer. Now, being an academic in the real estate world after completing my BSc at the UK's top real estate uni, it's been, shall we say, interesting listening to some of the theories online about how much of an inflation hedge real estate can provide you with. I mean, it is debated at the academic level just how good of a measure it is, but I mean, some of the theories I found while scrolling through the internet, I mean, who let the flat earthers out? It actually comes down to a very simple equation. Real estate will act as an inflation hedge even during periods of high inflation, so long as rent increases at a quicker rate than what inflation does. There is no special sauce, no secrets, no fanciness. It is that simple. If rent is increasing at a faster rate than the inflation rate is increasing, it will be a great inflation hedge. Don't worry, you home owner occupiers, I've got you covered in the next section, but just for now, I'm going to talk about renting and renters and investment properties. If you want to jump to the next section, the link will be down in the description below. But back to investors. Yes, it is that simple. There's no special secret, there's no special sauce, there's no hidden things. If your rent increases at a quicker rate than inflation, you will have an inflation hedging asset, saving you from losing your portfolio wealth like so many will do during periods of high inflation if we are to see it continue. But does this actually ring true? Do rents increase at a higher rate than inflation? Well, in the UK, over the last decade, 2 decades, it's been much of a muchness. Some sources will say rents have risen quicker, some will say inflation has risen quicker. So as a broad sweeping statement, you can say they're about the same. But there's 2 things you have to remember about this. Number 1, during this period, we have not seen high rates of inflation. It's not risen as sharply as we've seen, so will this still ring true? And number 2, this is an average for the whole UK, meaning some properties will have done brilliant and made loads on inflation, others will have seen dramatic value decreases. That's the nature of an average. So the key is finding those properties that will go up in value with inflation as opposed to will fall. And how do you do that? Well, I'll let you know as soon as I've gone back and addressed my home owner occupier buddies. Because rental growth isn't the only way that your property can act as a hedge in inflation, because of what is known as capital appreciation, i.e. the sales price of your property is worth more than what you originally paid for it. It increases in value. Why does this happen during inflation? Well, with market uncertainty comes panic. With panic comes irrationality, and nothing breeds market uncertainty like high levels of inflation. People look for investments that aren't necessarily going to give them the best return, but that give them this feeling of being safe, being tried and trusted. And how does the old saying go? As safe as houses. When you invest in, say, a house, you can see it, it's physically there, you can touch it, you can go to it, you can see it standing. And that gives, to a certain extent, that feeling of safety, that feeling of comfort. So people will flock to it, moving their capital from assets that, say, might be a lot more speculative and a lot more risky, or that don't return as much as inflation do. Maybe they're bonds, maybe they're returning under that amount. They'll pull the capital from there and they'll push it into real estate. What does that do? Well, that spikes demand massively, and as we know, in the short term, buildings are fixed supply because, again, they take a while to build, they take a while to plan, they take a while to get up there, which just sees the price of your property jump up, giving you capital appreciation, and not just a hedge against inflation, but a real driving factor to drive the whole wealth of your portfolio up. This isn't the only reason that you see increases in the price of your assets. Remember at the start of the video when I mentioned that building materials are going through the roof in terms of pricing? Well, that has to be passed on to the consumer. Developers, the ones who are building these buildings, can't afford to take that as a loss. So what they end up doing is pushing the price onto the consumer and charging a higher price. That gives even more demand for your standing stock because that's so cheap compared to what's up there. And as the demand comes in for your cheaper stock, it doesn't remain at that cheap level anymore because there's so much demand for it. pushing it up further, again, giving you those better returns, making sure that you don't just not lose money, but you gain substantially. But this isn't risk-free by any means. As I said earlier, you look at the UK average, there'll be some properties that perform extremely well and are proper winners, and others that substantially lose value, where capital is pulled out of them because they're seen again as maybe risky or maybe not returning enough. So you've got to find the right property. How do you do that? Well, that's the million-dollar question. It isn't as simple as there's one definitive answer. There's two things I can say might increase your chances of getting that sort of property. Number one is investing in global homes of capital. New York and London have almost become like gold, where they're sort of like homes to so much capital that you invest there, purely because like everybody else has, like it just has this value to people. So again, investing in New York, investing in London can give you that. Well, as we've seen recently, London returns during COVID haven't been brilliant. The same for San Francisco. Historically, again, it has always had some pretty decent returns. The other option is what's known as thematic investing, and that is what you do when you're buying a business or when you're buying stock. You look at the fundamentals underneath, you look at the demand, what will there be for that building in the future, what demand is there now? So for instance, looking at ageing populations, do we need more care homes? Or if you're looking at buying a petrol station, is that the right thing to do, say in the UK where there's a push for electric cars? Are you going to see demand for those fall off? Are you going to see them massively lose their value over time? Or are people so worried and speculative about the future, about something that may or may not happen, could you get in now and have a massive paid price to rent received income from that? You have to do the deep digging on each property and come to your own conclusion, because remember, I am not a financial advisor. I repeat, I'm not a financial advisor. But if you do want to find out more, don't forget to subscribe and stay tuned, where I'll bring you more information on thematic investing, what to look for, and things like when is the right time to buy a house, and much more real estate and university based content. Thank you very much for your time, and have a wonderful rest of your day.